Today we have best-selling author, highly requested speaker, and close friend of Petra, David Rendall, here with us. You may have heard him speak at our events in the past, and we are super excited to have you back. And today, actually, David just let me know that this is the first time he's presenting his brand new talk. So you guys are the first ones to ever hear it. So Dave has spent the past couple of years developing a new assessment based on the belief that every weakness has a corresponding strength, and that those unique combinations are your defining features, and you should embrace them and amplify them. Today is going to teach us more about this new assessment and how you guys can apply it in your business and your life. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A button and a chat button. Be sure to use those to submit all of your questions and comments for David, and we'll be sure to get to them. And then this session will also be recorded, and we'll send out a recap to everyone and post it on the Petra website in the next 24 hours. So David, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away.
All right, awesome. So like she said, this is the first time doing this presentation, although I've been talking about this concept for a long time. And don't be afraid, I'm not selling you my assessment. In fact, I'm a terrible salesperson. That's one of my weaknesses. What I really want to do is help you understand assessments better, help you understand personality better, and help you understand what we can and can't change when it comes to these sorts of things. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And let's get started. So it's called Amplify because the idea is that too often we live in a world that sees getting better as moderation, reduction, or elimination of who you are. I love it that you're so intense, but if you could just dial it back. I love it that you're so organized, but if you could just dial it back. I love it that you're so analytical, but if you could just dial it back. And it sounds so reasonable, right? You're not terrible. You're not awful. You're not worthless. Just dial it back a little bit. Right? And sometimes we do hear people tell us to shut it off completely. You don't need to do that anymore. That's not working. That's not good, right? Moderation, reduction, or elimination. And what I'm trying to encourage people to do is to actually go in the opposite direction and pursue amplification. I think it's in the understanding and the dialing up, the cranking up, the amplification of who we are that we find success. And what I want to do is dig in a little bit of where did that elimination, moderation, and reduction comes from. And it comes from a misunderstanding of the way personality works. There's all sorts of personality assessments, and you've probably taken those, but there's some fundamental misunderstandings of what personality actually means. And the first myth is that personality is behavioral instead of preferential. What I mean by this is people go, well, I'm not really an introvert or an extrovert because I can go to a party and I can stay home by myself. So since I can behave in an introverted way and behave in an extroverted way, then I'm neither an introvert nor an extrovert, and therefore personality is stupid and doesn't matter because I can do whatever needs to be done. And that's not what personality is. Personality is preferences. It's not did you go or did you stay, it's did you want to go or did you want to stay. It's preferences for thought and action, right? It's not what do you do, but if you were in complete control, what would you do? If no one was pressuring you, if your boss wasn't pressuring you, if your organization wasn't pressuring you, if your spouse or partner wasn't pressuring you, if someone wasn't demanding or asking or pushing you to, if somebody wasn't shaming or guilting you into it, how would you prefer to live your life? That's personality. And someone's an introvert, not when they can't go to a party, not when they can't socially talk to other people without being weird. They're an introvert when they can do those things, but they'd rather not. They'd prefer not to. And someone's an extrovert when they would prefer to go out, when they would prefer to be around people, when they would prefer to not be alone. And even if someone's in the middle, that still matters because that means they don't prefer to be with a lot of people all the time, and they don't prefer to be always alone all the time. They prefer a decent mix, and that's still something because that person shouldn't put themselves in situations that require constant human contact or that require constant isolation. Even if you are a mix, it's still a relevant thing because your preferences matter. So that's the first one. People say, well, I can or I do. That's not personality. Personality is what would you prefer to do if you were in total control? Now, we're never in total control. So sometimes that's what harms our awareness of ourselves, is because since we're not in control, sometimes it's hard to know, well, what would I do if I wasn't constantly experiencing these pressures? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The second myth is that it's environmental instead of biological. Here's how this works. Somebody says, oh, well, I'm stingy and cheap and frugal because I grew up poor. And we didn't have a lot of money. And so I learned how to live on less. And I learned to be careful with the money that I had and to conserve the money that I had. And that sounds perfectly reasonable. And you go, okay, I get it, right? And you might even say, oh, I'm the same way. Right? Here's the problem with that belief. The problem with that belief is that person has a brother or a sister. And that person's finances are out of control. That person spends money they don't have. They own a home that they can't afford. They have cars that they can't afford. They have clothes that they can't afford. They've maxed out all their credit cards. They don't make enough money to cover all their bills. And when you ask them why, they say, oh, well, I'm like that because I grew up poor. And I decided I was never going to live like that again. And so that's why I do things the way they do. Both people have an environmental explanation, but they both grew up in the same environment. So it isn't possible that their environment turned them into stingy or into spending money they don't have. The environment didn't make them that way because they were in the same environment. And if the environment would have made them that way, they would have both ended up the same way. I'll give you another example, introverts and extroverts. You ask somebody, why are you an introvert? They go, oh, well, or extrovert. Let's start with extrovert. Somebody says, why are you an extrovert? They go, oh, well, I grew up in a huge family, 8 brothers and sisters. There were people around all the time. Our cousins were constantly having people over. My parents were big entertainers. And I just learned to just love interacting with people. And I just learned that I wanted to be around people. And I just learned, I mean, I've had no choice but to become an extrovert and to just really get involved in just being around people all the time and constantly being active doing something. Sounds 100% reasonable. Here's the problem. Talk to at least one and probably more of their 8 brothers and sisters, and one of them's a hardcore introvert that lives in a house in the woods and hasn't seen another person for the last 3 years, except when they went into town to get supplies. And when you ask that person, why are you such an introvert? You know what they're going to say? Because I grew up in a house full of 8 other people, and we were constantly having other people over, and it was an absolute disaster and an absolute nightmare. And I spent my whole life just wishing and hoping and waiting for a moment when I could finally be by myself. And now when I have the chance to be by myself, I'm absolutely holding on to it. And I don't want to be around anybody ever. They both have an environmental explanation, but they went in 2 different directions in the same environment. It's not the environment. Our personality is biological. You are who you are because that's the way you were made. And you prefer what you prefer because that's the way you are. The situation didn't cause it, it revealed it, right? The situation didn't cause it, it reveals it. Our personality isn't caused by the environment, it's revealed by the environment, right? The next one is ability versus energy. This is a little bit like the behavioral one, but not quite, right? We say things like, oh, well, I can do spreadsheets. Well, I can give presentations. I can do detail-oriented work. So I'm a detail-oriented person. No, that's not how personality works. The question is, when you do that, does it fill you up or does it empty you out? Does it give you energy or does it take from your energy? When we do things that are consistent with our personality, our energy and our confidence increase. This is my 3rd presentation of the day. I did a 4-hour presentation live for a group here earlier. I just finished a virtual presentation before this. When I'm faced with 3 presentations in a day, it fits who I am. It's part of who I am. It excites me. My energy and my confidence level go up, but that's not true for everybody. It's not whether you can do the presentations or not. It's not whether you have the ability to do the presentations. It's what happens to your energy and confidence. And we learn about our personality when we watch what happens to our energy, not when we watch what happens to our abilities. Learning a new skill doesn't mean that that skill is part of your personality or you were driven to do that because of your personality. The question is, what happens to your energy and your confidence when you're engaged in that activity, or when you're even thinking about, when you look ahead to that activity, does it start to drain you or does it fill you up, right? We talked about this a little bit a second ago. We think that personality is dependent on situations instead of transcending those situations. So people, when we talk about personality, say, oh, do you mean my work personality or my home personality? Do you mean my work personality or my home personality? That's not how personality works. You don't have a work personality and a home personality. You have a personality. You might behave differently at work than you do at home. You might behave differently at home than you do at work. But that's not your personality. Your personality isn't dependent on situations. It transcends those situations. So for example, if your personality is that you love to be in control of things, then if that truly is your personality, you will try to control things at work and you will try to control things at home. If you love to have a plan, you will plan things at work and you will plan things at home. If you find yourself planning things only when you're forced to at work, and being very spontaneous and unplanned at home, that's probably a pretty good sign that you're not a planner. You do it at work because it's required to be paid, but it's not your preference. Remember preferences. It doesn't energize you. You don't choose to do it voluntarily. So one of the things to do to understand your personality better is to ask, what do I do that transcends situations? What do I see happening consistently throughout different aspects of my life? That's how you know it's personality, right? Instead of simply a behavior that you need to engage in. And the last one, and this is sort of crucial for what we're talking about today, is that people believe that personality is changeable instead of stable. Oh, I'll change my personality. I guess I just need to change my personality. I saw that person change their personality. Now, let's talk about why you might think that happens, right? The only reason you think that happens is because you saw somebody change their behavior dramatically, and then you attribute that to a personality change. So let's talk about the most common ways that happens. Here's what will happen. Somebody will say, when my parents got divorced, my dad completely changed his personality. Probably not. What happened was your parents got divorced, and now your dad's acting like he wanted to act, but he couldn't before because he was married to your mom. So now that he's free from an external constraint that was impacting his behaviors, but not his preferences, he's starting to behave in a way that's more consistent with his preferences, with biologically who he is. And you're seeing the real dad maybe for the first time, but because before his life was restricted by his relationship with your mom and his desire to keep that relationship together. My mom just retired after 45 years and she completely changed her personality. No, she didn't. Your mom is now free from the restrictions of her job, her work, that role, her career, and now she's free to be who she prefers to be, who she biologically is, to do the things that give her energy. She doesn't have that restriction anymore. Oh my gosh, my dad, when we all left home, when they became empty nesters, my dad really totally changed his personality. No, he didn't. Being a father didn't take up as much time and energy anymore, and now he was more free to do what he wanted. You see the theme here, right? As those restrictions are released, you start to see people's preferences more clearly, and you call it personality change when it's just behavior change. And it's probably revealing, remember, personality is revealed by situations. It isn't caused by those situations. Once a situation allows the person to do what they want when we want, now you're seeing who that person really is, right? And so this is fundamental, especially that last one, because one of the things that we misunderstand that harms the way that we follow up on assessments with ourselves and others is we start trying to change ourselves and others when the assessment is over. Oh, time to fix it, time to change it, time to adapt, trying to adjust, trying to make it, right? And this is crucial, right? This is crucial. Because that's one of the biggest ones. Why would you, and I should have listed this on there, but it's kind of implicit in the last one. We think that some kinds of personality are somehow better or worse than others, instead of that they're neutral, that they just are what they are. Not only can you not change them, but you don't need to change them because there's nothing wrong with it in the first place, right? So let me give you an example of how I learned this for myself. And I'm not attacking you or your beliefs. These are my beliefs that have developed over time, and you're free to not subscribe to them. I just want to challenge the perspectives that I see out there and hopefully help you think about this a little bit differently. But here's a story I used to tell, and this has been a huge change for me, that I used to talk about my personality as though it was formed by situations. I thought it was caused by a situation instead of revealed by that situation. So my dad was laid off when I was in 7th grade, and it was financially devastating for us, absolutely devastating. And we had no money. We were getting our food from the food bank at the church. We were getting our clothes from the thrift store. I started delivering newspapers at 5 o'clock every day just to have a little bit of money to be able to, pay for some McDonald's on my way back from a basketball game when I was, on the school's basketball team. And I bought my family's first television and ceiling fans because we didn't have air conditioning. I was starting to help the family pay the bills when I was only 12 years old because my dad lost his job, and we went from not having very much to not having anything. And I grew up to become a person who worked 7 jobs to get through college, worked my way through, worked full-time while I earned a master's degree in the evening, worked full-time while I earned a doctorate, and taught part-time at other schools, became a full-time professor, and then started a business, wrote books, do Ironmans. And the story I thought was true and that I told myself and others was, when my dad got laid off, I learned that it was dangerous to put your financial future in the hands of one organization, one employer. And so I've always had multiple things going. I've always had a lot of options. I've always had a lot of different directions to secure myself, to insulate myself from the potential devastation of losing a job and going bankrupt and not being able to pay my bills. I'm this way. I'm motivated and ambitious and all these kind of things because my dad got laid off when he was 12. But here's why that's not true. And I discovered that it wasn't true, right? This isn't, again, me attacking you. This is me learning over time. So I'm at my brother's house. He actually lives in my parents' old house that we grew up in. He bought it from them. We're going to get to this in a second. And he was laid off at the point. He was unemployed and had been for a significant period of time. And I said to him, while we were watching TV at 9 o'clock in the morning and he was sipping a Jack and Coke, I said to him, this must be a real bummer to be laid off. And I know it must be frustrating. And I'm sorry you're going through. It's trying to empathize with what he was going through. And as he takes a sip again of his alcohol at 9:30 in the morning, he goes, unemployment's not that bad. Bothers my wife a lot and she's upset about it, but I'm doing fine. You know what lesson my brother learned from experiencing the same exact thing that I experienced at 12 years old, seeing my dad get laid off? You know what my brother learned? It's survivable. It's not the end of the world. We're all still alive. It's not the end. Keep going. It'll be fine. It'll probably turn out okay in the end. My brother and I faced the same exact thing, and my personality revealed itself to be a very motivated, ambitious, driven person, which I now firmly believe I would be regardless of whether my dad ever got laid off. And my brother's a casual, laid back, easygoing, satisfied person who's happy with what he got, never went to college, works at a job he gets laid off on a regular basis. It's difficult physical work, and he's done the same thing for the last 25 years. My brother's personality was revealed by my dad's layoff. Mine was revealed by my layoff, but they weren't determined by that layoff, right? And here's why that's crucial, right? Here's why that's crucial, because one of the things that we want to do with this, you can change, you can be someone else, you need to change, you can change other people, is we talk about things like you need to stretch your person. We need to stretch other people. I know I don't want you to change. I just want you to flex your person. I just want you to be a little different when you need to, when the situation calls for it. I just need you to, right? And I want to give you an illustration that reveals the danger of trying to change what is supposed to be stable, right? Trying to change what's supposed to be stable. The way to think about this is to think about your who you are like a rubber band. And who you are is right here. And somebody says, you know what, I want you to be more like this. And they start pulling and they start pulling and they start pulling on that rubber band. And there's two things that can happen. They think they're stretching you. They think you're improving you. They think somehow maybe you're about to come over and then be in a different spot. Now, first of all, even if you came to that different spot, you're not in a better spot because no personality is better or worse. You're just in a different spot, so they haven't improved you, but that's not going to happen either. You're a rubber band and they're stretching it, they're stretching it, they're stretching it. Two things can happen. Number one, it's going to snap back. Right? And not only is it going to snap back, it's going to go even past where it was before. Let's stop and talk about that. Let's say you're a really introverted person and somebody in your life believes they're going to stretch you and make you better by teaching you how to interact with others and forcing you to go out to activities with a lot of other people and do things that you don't want to do because it's going to stretch you and help you and teach you and make you better, right? So they stretch and they stretch and they stretch, but when they let go, you don't just swing back, you actually go over here. You spend a little more time by yourself than you normally would. You completely lock yourself in your house for the entire weekend. You turn off your phone and you close the blinds. You shut off the TV and close your eyes. You need to renew by being completely alone because you get energy and confidence from being by yourself because you are an introvert. It is not just your behavior, it's your preference. And when somebody forces you to be inconsistent with that, it doesn't change you, it just drains you. Right? So that's one option. It can snap back and actually need to go farther in the other direction just to recharge and just to recover. But the other more dangerous one is we break, right? We break, people pull and they pull our job pulls and our spouse pulls and our kids pull and our volunteer activities pull. And we keep forcing ourselves to do things that don't fit who we are. And it doesn't create growth, it creates damage. And at some point, the rubber band breaks, right? We're not breaking, we're not healing people, we're not improving other people, we're not helping other people, we're damaging them in our effort to change their personality or to force people to act in ways that are inconsistent with who they are, thinking that somehow it's going to turn them into a fundamentally different person, and it's not, right? It's not. And that's why I talk about amplification. How do you accept who you are, appreciate who you are, accept who other people are, appreciate who other people are, instead of trying to change that and damaging people in the process? So that's the first step. Don't change, accept, right? Don't change, accept. So this is a weird thing to learn. I studied counseling psychology for 6 years, and guess what counseling psychology is about, right? It's about changing, right? It's about people who want to change. It's about people who need to change. It's about people who are motivated to change. And so you'd think if you study counseling psychology, you got an undergraduate degree and then a master's degree in counseling psychology, you think that what you'd learn is just how to help people make better decisions, right? How to give them advice that when they implement it, it's going to be useful. But what I noticed is that's really not what happens as you study counseling psychology, right? Let's think about the process of somebody signing up for therapy. Someone's living their life and something's not right. They're unhappy with something that isn't working and they try to fix it. And they can't fix it on their own. And so they talk to some friends or some family members and they can't get help there either. And they maybe read some books or go to some seminars and they can't get better there either. And maybe they even sign up for some coaching or something like that, but they just can't shake it. And so they decide, you know what, I need therapy. I'm going to pay another human being to help me fix my problems. You'd think the motivation is already there. The desire to change is already there. This is going to be easy. When you're a therapist, just go, oh, try this, or oh, I learned this in school, or hey, read this book, or oh, you just got to try it this way, or oh, just say it this way, or oh, just. It should be the easiest job on earth because the person has decided that they can't do this without help from another person, and they're willing to give you money to do it. And you know what they teach you for 6 years in counseling psychology? How to get people to change when they don't want to. And you know what I learned? People don't change that much, right? People don't change that much. Psychology is about changing people. Counseling is about changing people. And the number one lesson that you learn when you really dig in the world of changing people is that people do not want to change and that people do not change even when they've paid you to help them change. And I learned this lesson on a personal level as well. My grandparents were born in 1920. My grandparents were born in 1920. My grandfather flew bombers over Italy in World War II. My grandparents were farmers in Wisconsin for most of their adult lives, and they would spend their winters in Florida to escape the terrible snow and cold. My grandparents, even though life expectancy was early 40s, and especially during the Depression and the World Wars was even lower, even though life expectancy was 40s and 50s, my grandparents lived to be 95 years old. And I visited my grandparents shortly before they passed away. And my grandma said something that I'll always remember. She complained to me that my grandpa didn't talk to her enough. And what was interesting is she talked to me like she was on the verge of a breakthrough. Like grandpa was just about to become the person that she always wanted him to be. You see, we live in a world that teaches us that if you want it bad enough and you try hard enough, you can be whatever you want to be. And grandma believed that. And so she believed that if grandpa really loved her, he would start talking to her more. And she was still waiting in her 90s after being married for more than 70 years for grandpa to become the man that she always wanted him to be. And grandpa was doing somewhat similar on the other side. His process was quieter and it looked like this. Maybe if I stay really quiet and really still, she won't see me. And she'll shut the hell up and leave me alone, right? Grandpa was waiting for grandma to be quiet. Grandma was waiting for grandpa to start talking. Neither could accept that the other person was who they were biologically, preferentially, and they weren't doing it to bother the other person. They were just being true to her they were. Grandpa wasn't holding out on grandma with all sorts of stuff that he could have said but didn't want to. And we're going to talk about alignment in a minute. Remember, grandpa was a farmer. What did grandpa spend all his days doing? Driving around in a tractor. And when he wasn't driving around completely alone in a tractor before cell phones and before really radio contact with anybody, he was driving a semi-truck, taking the crops to the Del Monte factory, to the food processing plant, to the grain depot. Grandpa had the perfect job for who he was, and grandma, meanwhile, was handling family reunions basically every day as she fed the farm hands and all the family members that worked for the family farm. She did more human interaction and more activity on a daily basis than most people would be comfortable with. Grandma was an extreme extrovert, grandpa was an extreme introvert, and they both somehow thought that the other person was somehow going to change after 70 years of not changing. And that's how ingrained this false belief is that people can be whatever they want to be if they just want it bad enough and they just try hard enough. It's simply not true, right? It's simply not true. And even little kids understand this, right? Even little kids understand this. Little kids, they see me, I'm 6'6", and one of the first questions a little kid will ask you is, did you play basketball, right? And I did. I found a situation that rewarded me for who I was instead of trying to be something that I wasn't. But imagine I told that kid, you know what? I didn't play basketball. I always wanted to be a jockey and ride a horse to victory in the Kentucky Derby. And that was my lifelong dream. And I've pursued it and I've pursued it. And I think someday I will achieve it, even though no one taller than 5 foot has ever won a major horse race. And to be a jockey, you have to be well below average in both height and weight. Dave, what an exciting dream for you to have. It's not an exciting dream, it's a stupid dream. Because it's a dream that isn't achievable, because even if I wanted to, it's not possible for me to do that because it doesn't fit who I am. And you might say, okay, Dave, that's obvious, but personality isn't like that, but it is. Personality is just as unchangeable. Now, remember, I'm not saying behavior is unchangeable, right? But I'm saying personality. You can't make yourself want something you don't want. You can't make yourself like something you don't like. And you don't need to change your personality anyway, because there's nothing wrong with the person that you are. Success and happiness comes from accepting who we are and living a life that's consistent with that instead of wishing we were something we're not. And this is where the world hasn't helped us, because it gives us movies like Rudy, where this guy who's too small and too slow and too weak to be on the football team tries to be on the football team, and then they have pity on him and they put him on the football team, and he plays 7 seconds at the end of one game. And that's the climax of a movie that's teaching you what? Do something you can't do and aren't good at, and wait for people to show pity on you and to allow you to do it, and then you never succeeded at it, and you certainly didn't go pro, and you certainly can't build a life around it. That's a terrible lesson. The end of Rudy should be, don't do that. That's stupid. Find situations that reward you for who you are instead of punishing you for who you are. And don't go after dreams that don't match who you are. Be willing to accept who you are, right? And the next one is, don't criticize, appreciate. Don't criticize yourself. Don't criticize other people. Appreciate who they are, right? There's an idea in psychology that's fairly new, right? About dandelions versus orchids, right? Dandelions versus orchids. And what happens with dandelions is they'll grow anywhere, as you see here. They'll grow in the concrete, they'll grow in sidewalks, they'll grow in blacktop, they'll grow in the harshest environments. You almost can't kill dandelions, but yet nobody values dandelions. And some people are like dandelions. They're resilient, they're successful, they're good in sort of any situation. And we think that it would be good to be dandelions, right? Except think about it. It seems good, grow anywhere, succeed anywhere, do well anywhere. We need more people like that, but how valuable are dandelions? On the other hand, there's orchids. Orchids are very difficult to grow. They require perfect conditions. They require exquisite, intricate care, and it's almost impossible to keep them alive no matter how hard you try. And some people are like that. They have weaknesses, they have struggles, they have challenges, they have difficulties, but they also have tremendous potential. Because unlike dandelions, orchids are incredibly valuable. We want orchids. Dandelions are abundant, orchids are scarce, right? And so when we encounter orchids in our life, we criticize them for not being, why can't you be tougher? Why can't you be stronger? Why can't you be different? Why can't you not be who you are? Why can't you be more like something else? Instead of acknowledging that sometimes, right, the things that are the most difficult to cultivate are also the most valuable, right? And what if we treated people this way? What if instead of criticizing people for what they weren't, we acknowledged what they were and tried to create environments, we're going to talk about alignment later, that encouraged them and helped them and supported them to, again, be who they were. One of the illustrations that bothers me the most is when people talk about metamorphosis. And I know I'm on rants here and I don't care. This is my thing and I'm excited about it. And maybe some of this is connecting and maybe it isn't. And we're not in person, so I can't see how people are responding. But this stuff bothers me because I think it sets up a world that just simply isn't reality. And then it actually crushes people instead of motivating people because people go, well, I guess if I wanted it bad enough and tried hard enough, I could do it and I'm not doing it. So therefore something's wrong with me. And so we talk about metamorphosis and we're, oh my gosh, and this caterpillar turns into a butterfly. But here's the thing, caterpillars never turn into a rhinoceros. Caterpillars never turn into a squirrel. Caterpillars never turn into a deer or a bear. Caterpillars turn into exactly what they're biologically programmed to turn into, which is either a moth or a butterfly. It's not real metamorphosis. It's just a transition from who they were on the inside to revealing it on the outside. You don't turn yourself into something else. Metamorphosis in that sense isn't really real. The real lesson we should learn from that is know that there's something beautiful inside of you and be ready to help to reveal it instead of wishing you were something that you're not. Know that even if it doesn't look like it to others, there's something valuable inside of you and it just hasn't come out yet. And you want to cultivate that, not cultivate something you don't already have. Raving like a lunatic here in a room all by myself. And that's my personality. I get energy and confidence from sharing these ideas. I think this stuff matters. I think this stuff is important. And I watch the damage that these false beliefs have in people's lives. And that's why I'm passionate about doing that. And that takes us to the next one, which is don't control, amplify. Right? Control means reduce, moderate, eliminate. We've talked about that. I don't think we should do that with our personality, with our lives. We should amplify. I know this is going to step on some toes because this is everywhere. And you all are involved in personal growth and personal development, business growth and business development. You wouldn't be here and you've seen this and it seems to make a lot of sense. Oh, there's your comfort zone. And then there's where the magic happens. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is one of the most dangerous things that we teach people. You know what? You're comfortable for a reason because your personality gives you energy and confidence when you're in certain situations and doing certain kinds of activities. Right? They asked Pavarotti, they said he was one of the most famous opera singers of all time. And they say, how are you so disciplined? How are you so disciplined? He said, it's not discipline, it's devotion. Pavarotti didn't have to force himself to do things that he didn't want to do in order to be successful. He was so devoted. He was so passionate about opera that came out. He wanted to devote the time. He wanted to devote the energy. I want to do this presentation. I wasn't like, oh, geez, you guys want me to do this presentation? You know what? No, I don't want to do that. Oh, but I guess I should force myself to do it because that's where the magic happens. Absolutely not, right? I get to change people's hearts, change people's minds, change people's worlds. I get emails from people on a regular basis telling me how these ideas have changed their lives, and I love it while I'm doing it. You can be comfortable and growing and improving at the same time. And in fact, I think that's where most of it happens. You know what happens when you get too far out of your comfort zone? You get overwhelmed and shut down, right? That's, if you've ever heard the concept of flow, it's not being way outside of who you are that makes you better. It's working within who you are and pushing the boundaries and stretching from the inside, building on the foundation of who you are and expanding that, amplifying that into other realms. It's not throwing it away. Why is who you are and what you're comfortable with something to be so upset about? Aren't there lessons to be learned by what we're comfortable with? I just ran my first 100-mile race last year. I do Ironman triathlons because I love to be outside, because I love to be active, and I got in trouble my whole life because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I'm told. Right? And they told me hyperactive, they told me I had ADHD, they told me I need medicine to fix it. And getting out of my comfort zone at that moment meant sitting still, forcing myself to not move, doing what they wanted me to do. Get outside your comfort zone, Dave. Force yourself, it'll discipline you. It'll show you, no, it wasn't, it was a rubber band and it broke me. And then I became an adult, and then I get to be active, and then I am active. And people say, wow, that's amazing, Dave. How do you push yourself to run so far? I don't push myself to do any of that. I love it. And some of these people who are selling you all of this discipline are liars. Because if that person who's so disciplined that they work out all the time and they do all these things, if you told them, in fact, watch them when they get injured. What happens? You know what really active people, you know what happens when they get injured? They get depressed. They get suicidal. They get miserable. It ruins their life and relationships. They turn into a nasty person because when they can't be active, it actually destroys them. They don't have discipline. That's not where their activity comes. It comes from devotion. Their comfort zone is doing things that seem uncomfortable to you, but they're not uncomfortable to them. I love speaking, and most people fear it more than death, right? It's not true that you can't be comfortable and be growing at the same time. And this is a dangerous idea that tells people, throw away who you are and go get something else, because who you are right now isn't that valuable, and it's certainly not worth building on. Go find something else. And that's absolutely not true. We should be building on and amplifying who we are, right? So I've built a section. I'm not going to talk a ton about this, but I just wanted to give you one of these examples because I spend a lot of time on this. I built an Amplify section into every one of the reports for every one of the features that you can get as part of the Amplify assessment. And here's the way I say it to people. Here's one for chaotic creator. You're messy and you're creative, right? You're chaotic, but you love to create. You're incredibly imaginative. And so here's what it says: amplify, right? Be even more creative and innovative, and be even more chaotic and disorganized. Turn up the volume on who you are. Amplify it. Don't turn it down. Don't moderate it or reduce it. Take something apart. Throw something on the floor or at the wall. Break something. Break everything. Spill something. Rip something. Hit it with a hammer. Turn it upside down. Mix up the papers on your desk. Shuffle the songs in your playlist. Wear clothes that don't match. Change your route to work. Rearrange your workspace. Move to a different workspace. Work in places that aren't designed for work. Disrupt your usual way of doing things. Disrupt your thinking. Disrupt everyone. Disrupt everything. Find something amazing in the last place you'd expect. They say you're too chaotic. Maybe you're not chaotic enough. And if you don't hear anything else from me today, that's what I'm going to hear. They say you're too, fill in the blank. Dial it back. Moderate it. Reduce it. Eliminate it. What I'm telling you, what Amplify tells you, is maybe you're not enough of that. Maybe those people don't know what they're talking about. Maybe the magic happens when you turn up the volume on who you already are, instead of somehow having this disdain, this distaste that they've taught us to have for who we are, and think we somehow need to throw this away to be somehow something better, right? And I'll give you one example. There's an entire book by Tim Harford called Messy: The Power of Disorder to Transform Our Lives. In my first book, I wrote about a book called The Perfect Mess: The Hidden Benefits of Disorder. There's a lot of value in disorder. There's a lot of value in mess. There's a lot of value in amplifying things that everyone else, that Marie Kondo wants you to turn back down. And there's also tremendous value in being Marie Kondo and Marie Kondoing things and being hugely organized. And we're going to talk about that in a second. It's that you don't tell messy people to stop being messy. You ask them to invest and get excited about and move farther into that and see how that can be used in a valuable way. And if you're not creative because you're super organized and that's just not part of who you are, then that's fine too. Be super organized. Amplify who you are. Don't trade it in for something else. And you might think, okay, Dave, but that's, there's some things that are just bad, like addiction. You can't be a drug addict. You can't be an alcoholic. You can't be an addict. There are some things you have to dial back. And that's a great point, except it's not true. I have a ton of examples of this, but I'll just give you one. Most of the people who run ultra marathons beyond 26.2 run 100-mile races, 250-mile races, multi-day races are former drug addicts and former alcoholics. There's no turn it down. It's only a question of what are you turning up. Addicts don't stop being obsessed with things. They don't stop going too far and doing too much. They just have to find something healthy to go too far and do too much with. They are biologically programmed to go too far and do too much. The only question is, can they do it in a way that is productive instead of destructive? This is my friend Henry Ward. Here's just one of the things that he does. He raises money to help other people through addiction. And he does that by going to the start line of the Boston Marathon. And then he runs to the end of the Boston Marathon. I'm sorry, he starts at the finish line of the Boston Marathon in the middle of the night 2 days before. And he runs from the finish line to the start line of the Boston Marathon, 26.2 miles. And then he runs from the start line back to the finish line, and now he's gone 52.4 miles. And then he runs back to the start line again. Now he's run the marathon 3 times, and now it's time for the start of the race. And then he runs the race with everyone else the 4th time. More than 100 miles. He finishes with everybody else, and he finishes ahead of a bunch of people who've only done 26.2 miles. Henry Ward has conquered his addiction to alcohol and drugs by becoming addicted and obsessed to long distance running. And he wrote a book about how running changes life. And it's the rule, not the exception, in the ultra marathon and in the ultra distance and ultra endurance world, right? You don't heal someone like Henry by telling him to dial it back, turn it down, shut it off. The question is, where can he productively amplify who he is instead of trying to be someone else? And that's a good example of this next one, which is don't conform, align, right? This isn't about fitting in or doing things the way other people believe we need to. It's about finding the right fit for who we are and moving ourselves into situations that reward us for who we are instead of trying to turn us into someone else. I'm going to keep attacking these proverbs, and one of them is bloom where you're planted, right? Bloom where you're planted. What a stupid thing to say to people. Imagine I have a beautiful cactus and I'm growing it in my home, in this dry, sunny part of my home, and I know not to water it too much, and I've followed all the rules, and then I go, you know what? This thing puts out these beautiful flowers once a year. I'm going to take it to the Arctic Circle, and I'm going to plant it in some snow and some ice, and I'm going to toughen it up, and I want to watch it bloom where it's planted. I want to see if it has what it takes and if it can adapt and adjust. Come on, just bloom where you're planted, just bloom where you're planted. What a stupid thing to say to people, right? Things don't bloom where they're planted. They bloom where they're designed to bloom. When you put a cactus in an environment with too much rain and not enough sun, it just dies. When you put a plant in an environment that's too sunny and doesn't have enough water, when it needs shade and it needs a lot of water, it dies. When you put yourself in situations that you're not designed to be in, you don't bloom, you die. And doing more of it, rubber band effect, just breaks you. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't fix you. It doesn't improve you. It doesn't strengthen you. We don't grow in situations where we aren't designed to grow. And so one of the most important things we need to do is find out, who am I and how do I consistently put myself in situations that help me become more of who I am instead of trying to turn me into something else. Don't bloom where you're planted. Move yourself into situations where you are likely to bloom. One of the things we do in the Amplify assessment is every report has a section telling you this is probably, here's a list of some characteristics to look for in situations that would make it more likely that where based on your profile, this is where you'd likely be successful. Look for situations like this that will help you succeed. Don't try to put yourself, and then the next part we'll talk about in a second, but it says, and then stay away from situations like this, right? Stay away from situations that require you to be something that you're not. So let's practice. So if you can jump on the chat here, jump on the chat function, and we're going to practice some alignment, right? We're going to practice some alignment. So I'm going to give you a weakness. I'm going to give you a negative. And then what I want you to do is I want you to tell me where this person would fit. What's a job for this person, right? What's a job for this person? So this person's too critical. Type in the chat, what's a job for this person, right? What's a job for this person? This isn't a tricky one. Actually, one answer is right on the screen already. You just have to look and see the words, it's already there. Roanne says quality control. Mandy says CPA, health inspector. David says accounting, editor, auditor. You guys are crushing it, right? You guys are crushing it. Those are all jobs that require somebody to be what? To be critical, right? To look at something and to find what's wrong. There's another one. I was trying to make it simple. You guys are actually smarter than the simplest one. It's just critic, right? It's just critic. You're a music critic. You're a movie critic. You're a food critic. It's a job that rewards you for being a critic, but these other ones that you had are great as well, right? They're jobs that you're being paid. Nobody says, oh my gosh, why are you being so critical? I'm the inspector, I'm the auditor. This is my job to do this, right? I get to be who I am. I'm in an environment that rewards me for being more of who I am instead of less, right? All right, great job. Let's do another one. Too controlling. Right? Too controlling. Some people have baggage. They put like boyfriend or girlfriend or ex-wife or something on there, but let's try to stay focused. Too controlling. Pilot, project manager, CEO. Remember, the simplest answer is already on the screen, but I like these as well. Project manager is a great one. They got to control, make all the things work, fit all the things together. CEO, control the company, right? Karthik says, there it is, controller, right? There's a job usually in the accounting department called controller. There's also a job called air traffic controller. You don't want an air traffic controller that's like a social worker, right? Oh, I don't know. You want to try to land two planes side by side at the same time? Who am I to argue? Let's explore who you are and just give you opportunities to just try these new things that you'd like to try. That's not who you want as an air traffic controller, right? That's not who you want as an air traffic controller. So look at these things. These are criticisms, but without too much effort, you're immediately, and you're doing better than me. I just try to make it simple. You're smarter than that. You're coming up with a bunch of options where, hey, it's good to be like that in this situation. And then that situation, forget, here's where the magic happens. That situation allows me to do what I'm good at and be successful at the same time, right? Last one, this is super easy. Analytical, you're too analytical. What's the job? Right? Too analytical, what's the job? Yeah, analyst, right? Analyst. Now here's crucial, this is the transition. Oh, you're too analytical. Well, first of all, who's usually saying that to you? People who aren't very analytical. What the hell do they know about how analytical a person could be? None of this stuff is real. There's no blood test for how analytical you should or shouldn't be, right? And when you became an analyst, and this is crucial when it relates to Amplify, you'll know you found alignment when the situation actually requires you to amplify who you are because of the situation that you're in. Be more of what most people were asking for less of, right? And what might happen when you become an analyst and you're surrounded by other analysts and the job is analysis is you might discover you're not very analytical. You're more analytical than whoever you were hanging out with, but it's just like being a high school baseball player and you think you're the most amazing thing on earth because you're the best in your town. And then you go to a state tournament and you discover there's 75 people better than you. You don't need to cut back or stop playing so much baseball. You actually need to play a lot more baseball. You're not as good as you thought you were because you weren't comparing yourself to people who actually had those characteristics at a high level. A great example of that is if they tell you you're too organized and you go to the National Association of Professional Organizers meeting, you're likely to discover there's a whole other level of organization you didn't know about. The people who are calling you a neat freak or a clean freak have probably never been to the National Association of Professional Organizers. And for those people, you'd probably be an amateur. They're like, sorry, you can't join. You're not professional enough yet, right? And that's what I'm talking about. Amplify is about going pro at your strongest features, instead of thinking success is about kind of leaving those things to the side and going and grabbing some other features that are somehow going to balance you out and make you a better person. It's about digging deeper into who you are and turning up the volume. And here's one of the reasons that's so powerful, is because I firmly believe that we have something inside of us that I'll call a self-control tank, right? And when you do the things that fit who you are, remember, energy and confidence, it fills you up, right? It fills up your tank. You can actually, yeah, I think you can see it here. I'm on my third presentation day we talked about. I'm 6 hours in. It's incredibly hot in this tiny little room. I couldn't stand up, so I'm sitting down, and I'm still in here raving like a lunatic. I have more energy right now than I've had at any other point during this day. My job fills me up. Your work can fill you up. Your life can fill you up. Your activities can fill you up. You can do what you love. You can do what you do well. You can do what energizes you, and you can get better at the same time. And the reverse is when you do the wrong things, it drains you out, and now you don't have the energy to be fit. You don't have the energy to be a good spouse. You don't have the energy to be a good parent, because that situation you keep putting yourself in, that job you keep putting yourself in, that role you keep putting yourself in is emptying you out. It's not making you stronger. It's breaking your rubber band. It's not fixing you, it's damaging you, because we all come with a finite level of self-control. And when we waste it on situations that don't fit us, we don't have it left over for situations that demand more of what we don't have any of, right? And so one of the things this is about, one of the things Amplify is about energy efficiency. I believe we have a limited amount. We have to steward it. We have to be careful. If I told you you have half a tank of gas and you have to make it last for a week, you drive differently, right? And one of the mistakes about changing personality and all this is we think we have unlimited time, energy, and resources to just go off in every different direction and be a bunch of different people and do a bunch of different things and change a bunch of things. And no, you don't. You have limited time, energy, and resources. And one of the ways to amplify is to steward those resources and use them in a way that's likely to have the biggest payoff, right? The next one is don't confront, avoid, right? Don't confront, avoid. So one of the things that people love to talk about when it comes to personal improvement is procrastination. Oh my gosh, how do I overcome procrastination? How do I overcome procrastination? Here's what I'll tell you, don't. Procrastination is a big flashing neon sign telling you this is not your thing. This is not your personality. This is not who you are. We don't procrastinate things that we like and that we're good at. Remember, we get energy and confidence from doing things consistent with our personality. Personality is our preferences, meaning you prefer it, and when no one's forcing you, that's what you automatically do. That's the opposite of procrastination. When you're procrastinating, that's a flashing neon sign saying stop, avoid, get away, run away, move in the opposite direction. This isn't for you. This isn't where you're going to have the biggest impact. Now, this is crucial, right? This is crucial. They did an experiment, and they took kids who weren't reading very well. They could read 100 words a minute. They taught them speed reading. They got them up to 150 words a minute, 50% improvement. But there was another group of kids, the good readers. They could read 300 words a minute. They gave them the speed reading course, and when they were done, they could read 3,000 words a minute. So here's the question you got to ask yourself, right? Do you want to get 50% better, or do you want to get 1,000% better? You can try to fix your weaknesses. You can try to be someone you're not. You can try to move in a different direction. You can reject who you are in favor of some other ideal sort of thing, or you can build on who you are and amplify it. Do you want incremental growth, or do you want exponential growth? When we build on our strengths, when we amplify, when we build on the foundation of who we are, who we're biologically designed to be, when we build on the core of who we've been since the day we were born, we see exponential growth instead of incremental growth. But it's not just the growth. See, the other lie we've been told is that rewards increase as our ability increases. Be a little more organized. Be rewarded a little more for it. Be a little more empathetic. get rewarded a little more for it. No matter how bad you are, if you'll just get a little better, there'll be a little reward. And unfortunately, that's not true. Here's how the reward curve works. When you're not very good at something, you get nothing for it. When you get a little better, you get almost nothing for it. And when you get a little better, you still get nothing for it. The rewards begin to go absolutely vertical when you're very good and you get a little bit better. When you have a high natural ability, natural preference, natural inclination, and you build on that core of who you are, and then you push it even just a tiny bit, the rewards become absolutely exponential. So it's not just about incremental or exponential growth, it's about incremental or exponential reward. In baseball, minimum wage is $500,000 a year. But a few years ago, Clayton Kershaw got $30 million for 1 year of pitching for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He made 60 times what the lowest paid player made in baseball. Is Clayton Kershaw 60 times better than any other major league baseball player? Absolutely not. It's not even possible to be 60 times better than somebody who's at the peak of their sport, right? He's a tiny bit better than someone who's very, very, very good, and he gets 60 times what they make. In 2016, I was paid for one speech. Remember, I spent my whole life getting in trouble because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, do what I was told. Now I get paid to stand up and talk and run my own business. And in 2016, I got paid the same amount for one speech for Microsoft as I got paid for an entire year, 2,000 hours of work. I got paid for one speech for Microsoft, the same amount I got paid for 2,000 hours of work early in my career. When I was doing what I was designed to do, when I was doing what I was made to do, when I was amplifying who I was instead of trying to be somebody else, when I wasn't trying to fix my weaknesses, I was building on the corresponding strength, when I wasn't trying to throw away and reject, moderate, reduce, and eliminate who I was, when I was amplifying who I was, it was worth 2,000 times what it was worth when I was trying to conform and adapt and adjust and be what other people told me that I was supposed to be. Do you want incremental rewards or exponential rewards, right? Do you want incremental rewards or exponential rewards? So we only have a couple minutes left, and so I want to wrap up with a great success story that I love from a friend of mine called Mike Bazar. He runs an MSP, a managed service provider, like basically outsourced IT. And he posted this on Facebook, and I couldn't believe it because it's the essence of what we're doing with Amplify. And now I've done Amplify with his whole team because he gets what we're talking about. And here's what he said, right? He said, one of our engineers can solve any problem you put in front of him. He's amazing. Sounds great. But he tends to ignore everything else while he's working on the issue. So what do? Stop ignoring everything else. You've got to be able to multitask. You've got to be able to focus on other things. You've got to be able to prioritize. That's not what Mike did. What Mike said, instead of trying to fix him, we're finding ways to let him use that superpower and tackle bigger and more involved problems, and then shielding him from interruptions. Don't change him. Change the situation, help him find alignment, treat him like an orchid, create a greenhouse around him that allows him to bloom and be amazing. He's got amazing potential, but we don't need to turn him into a dandelion and ask him to do all these different things. We've got plenty of dandelions. In fact, we're trying to kill some of the dandelions. He's an orchid. Let's help him bloom. Don't make him bloom where he's planted. Move him to a situation where he's more likely to bloom. Don't stretch him outside of his comfort zone and force him to do things that he's not very good at and end up probably breaking or damaging him in the process. Let him use that superpower and tackle bigger and more involved problems, amplify, and then shielding him from introductions, build a wall, build a greenhouse for him. That's a completely different way to management. And that's not the only person they've done this with. He said, one of our technicians can be pushy. So instead of telling him to tone it down, have you heard that? Moderate, reduce, eliminate. We're putting him in charge of important projects where being pushy is a plus. We're giving him an opportunity to amplify instead of trying to moderate, reduce, or eliminate. Like I said, this is my first time doing this. As you can probably see, I'm incredibly excited about that. Maybe I shouldn't be, and maybe this hasn't been helpful, but I hope it has. And at the very least, I hope you see my passion for the work that I do, and you see that it's possible for you to have that passion in the work that you do and to amplify who you are on a daily basis. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. I'm not running away right away, but I'll turn it back over to Petra. And I appreciate you spending all the time with me today.
David, thank you so much for joining us. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll tackle them in the next minute here. As I said at the beginning, this session was recorded and we'll send out a recap and post it on the Petra website in the next 24 hours. While you're there, be sure to check out all the other upcoming events, like our workshops and webinars. And then we have a question in here that says, how do we take the Amplify test as an individual?
Yeah, at this point, just go ahead and send me an email, davidjrendall@gmail.com. We're kind of we're not really in the test phase. It's live, but it's not really designed for individuals right now. We're basically doing it with organizations. So if you want to take it as an individual, just send me a message. I'll send you a code and you can go ahead and take it.
All right, great. And then
I typed my email into there, davidjrendall@gmail.com.
Perfect. And I'll make sure we include that in the recap as well. And then Jennifer, I think that answers your question. You guys can all get your Amplify test done. Any other questions? If not, just thanks for tuning in, guys. And David, we appreciate having you.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Have a good day, guys.